Welcome to the Autism Central podcast, the home of real stories, honest conversations, and shared wisdom from England's National Autism Peer Education Programme. Here, we bring together autistic people and the people who love, support, and care for autistic people of all ages and backgrounds to explore every aspect of life. The National Autism Peer Education Programme is delivered by Anna Freud and commissioned by NHS England. Through education, coaching, and connection, we offer resources, group webinars, one-to-one peer support, and community events that centre lived experience and build real understanding. Our vision is a society where autistic people, their families, and those who support them are empowered, connected, and thriving. This is your space, your community, your podcast. Welcome to Autism Central. Joining me on the Autism Central podcast today is James Hunt, an award-winning autism advocate, storyteller and content creator with a global following of over 1 million people. As the founder of Stories About Autism, James has spent nearly a decade sharing the raw, unfiltered realities of raising his two autistic sons, offering hope, understanding and a much-needed voice for families navigating similar journeys. What began as a simple blog to help friends and family understand his world has evolved into a powerful online community, a successful podcast, and his recently released book, Love Needs No Words. It was an instant Sunday Times bestseller. His work has been featured in national press, leading podcasts and corporate initiatives where he educates brands, professionals, and the wider public on the realities of autism parenting. James speaks with warmth, honesty, and a dash of humour, turning life's most challenging moments into deeply relatable insights. Whether discussing the emotional rollercoaster of diagnosis, the battle for school support, or the unexpected joy found in a life he never imagined, his words resonate far beyond the autism community. Passionate about inclusion and advocacy, James also founded SAA Clothing, a brand that uses fashion to spark conversations and create belonging for autistic people and their families. Welcome to the podcast. And firstly, congratulations on the success of your book. For listeners who might not be familiar with your story, how would you describe your experience of fatherhood, raising autistic children, particularly as they move through teens into young adults?
Sure. So, firstly, thank you for having me on. It's great to be able to share our story here. I am a dad of two boys, Jude, who is 17, and Tommy, who is 14. So, we're very much in that teenage to adult period at the moment. They are both autistic, both non speaking, both high support needs, and go to a special needs school. So, I'd say parenthood has been very different than what I imagined, right from the very early days of when we were first hearing and talking about the words autism. I knew next to nothing about what it meant, what it would mean for Jude and for Tommy and for our family. And I guess I had to shift a lot of the things that we take for granted as parents. Like I said, both my boys are still non-speaking, so definitely when I thought I was going to become a dad, it never crossed my mind that my child wouldn't be able to speak. So it's been a journey, definitely, with lots of highs and lows along the way. And I guess as we approach, as we're in the teenage period and going towards adulthood, life looks very different even than what I imagined 5 years ago. I think that's probably one of the things that I've come to learn through my boys is that a lot of the plans that we have or the things that we imagine life will turn out, good and bad, may just never happen. And my boys have achieved so many more things than I thought they would in certain ways, and but at the same time, like I said, life is still very different. And I think one of the things with Jude and Tommy is that a lot of their needs are still, they have high support needs. They need help with getting dressed. They need help with showering. They need help with a lot of the things that naturally your kids grow out of. And now they're young men. and they're the same size as me, and they are, there's still, so fatherhood is very different than what I imagined.
Yeah, and you said there about 5 years ago, life looks very different to now to what you thought it would 5 years ago. We can often be in those seasons, can't we, of parenting and thinking this is never going to change. You know, I'm in the trenches here. This is never going to change. What have you noticed then that has changed? What has been different for you over that 5 year period?
Well, I think there's been a lot of adjustments we've had to make as a family. I spent a long time caring for my parents, and that sort of put a different dynamic on things, and was trying to figure out how Jude and Tommy would cope with that, and the change to routines, and the change in living circumstances, and there were lots of times where I thought that they wouldn't be able to cope, and they have, and they've shown me, great resilience and great ways to adapt. And I mean, I'll give you an example of something hugely positive that's happened in the last 6 months that I never thought would happen. Is so Tommy, we text each other every night, and that is something I just never thought would happen. It never crossed my mind that my son, he has no spoken words other than he can say the first syllable of a few words like da or ma for mum. And we have quite deep text conversations now where he tells me about his day. And that it started last September. And if you'd have asked me in August, I never would have thought this was something that was on our radar. It just happened out of nowhere. So I think that very much ties in with how you can't really predict. And I've tried my hardest to stay in the present as much as I can with, over the years. I think that's something that's really important for parents, that, when Jude was 5 and I was worrying about what 18 looked like, uh, there was no way I could predict what life at 18 would be like. And that's coming true now. But worrying about it so far in advance is really, there's that saying, right? If you worry about something that has never happened, you worry about it twice. And that I've tried really hard to sort of stay in the present. And maybe with Tommy's text messaging, like I said, I just never imagined that we'd get to that stage. And one day he just started typing, and he was offered a phone and showed it, and I got a hello dad message. And now it's just part of our everyday life. And that, I think, just shows that we never really know what's going to happen. As much as even now, being at 17 and 14, like, I don't know what 18, 19, 20 looks like.
There's something there, isn't there, about, as you say, staying in the present and holding on to hope. I mean, there'll be lots of parents listening to this episode who will be worried about the future for their children, who will have been told things by people about their children. What would you say to somebody listening who is in that place right now, James, to them who are hugely worried about the future for their children and wondering what life might look like?
I'd say that firstly that those feelings are completely natural, and you are allowed to feel them. You're allowed to go through all those emotions. I've definitely been through it. I've been sad, I've been anxious, I've been scared, I've been all of those things at many different points over the last 17 years. And they come and go. And I think you used the word seasons of parenthood a minute ago, and that I think is very true. There's been seasons where I'm hugely optimistic and positive, and seasons where I feel quite scared and worried. And I think what it's taught me over this time is that those seasons change, even when we're in our hardest moments, and maybe really worried and scared, that eventually things change, and I think we adapt ourselves as parents. We get more used to the way life is turning out, and we start focusing on different things. Like, I really don't focus on the fact that my boys can't speak anymore. It's part, it is their daily lives. And we communicate in so many different ways, and that at 5 or 6, that's all I could think about. How can they live this full life? How can they be happy if they're never going to be able to speak? And they prove to me every day how they can live a full life and be happy. And I've seen it now. I've seen those things happen. And I think in the early years, obviously everything's very new. You're a new parent, you're a new mum, you're a new dad, so everything is completely new. And all of these expectations you've had have been shifted and turned around, turned upside down, and it takes time to process that. I think I always say that time itself just makes a huge difference. However you feel today, in a month, 3 months, 6 months, you will feel different. Life will change. Our kids grow, our kids develop, and if we can get the right support in place, if we can find the right way to help them feel comfortable, to help them learn and grow, then there's so much joy to be had out there. And I completely assumed that being a dad would be about playing sport, would be about holidays, would be about days out, museums, all the things that happened in my childhood. I just assumed I'd be replicating that. And our version of life is very different. And it took a while to adjust to that. But now it is our normal. And it is what, for me, that's what fatherhood is. That's, I'm being the dad that they need. And we do the things that make them happy and that in turn make me happy. It's not the football matches that I imagined, but on Sunday I sat on the beach for 45 minutes and threw shells up in the air and dropped them all over Jude's hands, and we flicked them and threw them, and he stimmed and flapped and was really happy. And now that's as good as a football match. It really is. And I probably wouldn't have believed it when 10 plus years ago, but now the amount of joy he gets in that moment is probably more joy than he would ever get from going to a football match.
Yeah, so completely different version of what you thought life would look like and what it does look like. And talking about communication, then, and you know, Tommy, you were talking there about Tommy texting and you having this text conversation with Tommy. We often put so much emphasis, don't we, on the spoken word, but you'll know in your family that communication comes in very many different forms. And what have you learned then about communication? How do you communicate with your boys and your family? What are all the different ways that you do that? I mean, even the image of you being on the beach with Jude and throwing the shells up and Jude flapping and stimming, that's communication, isn't it? It's communication that I'm enjoying this moment. What have you learned about communication, James?
I think exactly that communication is so much more than spoken language or spoken words. It's Jude has taught me there's so many ways to communicate through body language, through like Jude can tell you so much with his eyes. I can know whether he's hungry, anxious, happy, uh, whether a meltdown's about to happen, whether he wants to do more, wants to finish. And that's come from spending hours and hours and hours with him and really becoming in tune with the way he communicates. And a lot of his communication will be he will lead you to things. He will lead me to the biscuit cupboard. He will lead me to try and get him some to the fridge to get him some more food. He will tap things that he wants. For instance, he'll tap the Alexa, and that's his sign of showing that he wants me to put music on or change the music. We will use objects of reference. I'll hold a car key up so he knows that we're going to go in the car and ask him if he wants to go. And again, he'll tap it. I'll give him choices of things to, again, tap and show what he wants. I can tell from the sounds that he makes whether he's enjoying something. Like at the beach, it's when he's flapping, and obviously I can tell from his facial expressions, from the smile, from everything else. But it's also you know, just because someone's non-speaking doesn't mean they're quiet at all. My boys are very loud in the moment, and often a lot of that is communication. Sometimes it's to themselves, just making happy sounds, or but often it's also it's showing their mood, it's showing frustration, it's showing anger, it's showing excitedness, excitement rather. There's so much that I get from Jude, and we have never had a single word from him. And it's taken time, and we're still hopeful that the communication will develop even more and develop further. Uh, but somehow we're able to, and the same with the people that work with him at school and the people who know him. Once you've spent a lot of time with him, then you really get to understand how he communicates. And then Tommy I'd say he has a much higher level of communication. He definitely understands everything I say to him now. And I'd say that sparked around 7 or 8, uh, that real deeper understanding of language. And he doesn't always want to understand what I'm saying, but he definitely takes it all in. And I know that he gets it. And then Tommy also he uses an AAC device where for anyone who doesn't know, an AAC device in this context it's an app on an iPad where the words have pictures or symbols associated with them. And he can type out a sentence and press a button, and the device will say it out loud. And that has been a life changing development for him to be able to use that, not only in the context of being able to say what he wants, being able to request exactly what he wants, but also he's really developed his understanding of language. The amount of times I've found him playing around with it, searching for words and pressing it and listening to it up by his ear in his own sort of time and space where he's comfortable. And that now, for anyone who follows us, that have seen plenty of videos of us going to the shop and him saying, "Dad, I would like a red cake," or "Dad, I would like a white milkshake," um, and that is what has led to the text messaging. I think he's being able to use that AAC device and being able to type and find the words that he wants. When he was offered a phone with WhatsApp, that's how straight away he started typing and started being able to send messages. And again, in the last 6 months, that's really developed in from simple like 2 word sentences to telling me about his day and about what happened yesterday, which we've never been able to do before. We've never been able to talk about the past, or he's only ever seemed comfortable talking about what's about to happen in the very near future. So I've never been able to say to him, like, "Oh, Tommy, what did you do today?" Or, "Tommy, did you like going to?" I might know what he did and say, "Tommy, did you like going to the park today?" And he doesn't want to respond or talk about it. But by text, he's telling me all about his day, uh, and describing things and telling me how he felt. And it's been life changing.
I mean, life changing for you, but I also think how life changing for Tommy. I mean, the fact that he is understood, his needs are understood, his wants are understood, his world is understood. And what difference have you seen in Tommy then from being able to express this, to communicate his needs and wants and desires and his world and his preferences? I mean, what a shift. What have you noticed in Tommy?
Firstly, I'd say his frustration levels have dropped massively. When he was younger, there was a lot of aggressive behaviour, when he'd get, and probably a lot of it was just like you said, just not being understood, not being able to express what it is inside him that he wants me to know, and that I guess would boil up and boil up and boil up, and then would explode, and we've had very little of that behaviour in the last 3 or 4 years. We still have moments and still have meltdowns and still have, but even that, I'd say when it does happen, we're able to recover much quicker. We're able to, maybe he's able to understand quicker what's going on and what he needs. And that that's made life so much happier, for him, of course, but also for us as a family, because we're less on eggshells and less, you know, nervous about the day going wrong suddenly, because we're able to talk about things. We're able to get Tommy's opinion on things and get him to show if he's happy or if he doesn't want to do something, or and able to talk about it a lot more. And that has been a huge change. And I think it's made him more confident as well. It's definitely made him more able to be out there in the world and be able to go and do things, because when he's if he's gone to a park or the fun fair or something like that, we're still able to communicate if he wants to leave, if he wants to stay longer, like those simple little things of communication that for a long time we've not been able to do.
And has it helped you, do you think, James, in your role as a father, as a human being, of being able to see the difference by Tommy being understood and being seen, that actually probably a lot of that behavior that you witnessed when he was younger and you didn't have this knowledge that you have now, um, was behaviors of distress, wasn't it? It was behaviors of frustration. And if you weren't understood, if we were having this podcast conversation today and you were talking to me and I wasn't listening or wasn't understanding you, the frustration, anybody would feel frustrated. Do you think that's shifted something in you, certainly over the last 6 months to a year?
Yeah, I think it's given me a much deeper understanding of Tommy. It's given me into his personality, into also just realizing that there's so much more going on, even without those spoken words, which is something I've known for a long time. But often, when someone's non-speaking, we sometimes people can sometimes think they're not the brightest. Let's say that they're not that they don't have anything to say, and years ago, I got introduced to the idea of presuming competence, and assuming that even if you're talking to someone and they're not responding, and it doesn't seem like it's going in with them, or they're not reacting in the way that you want them to react, it doesn't mean that they don't understand what you're saying, or that the words are too much for them. And I think often with our kids who are non-speaking, that happens a lot. People talk around them rather than to them, and I think Tommy has really sort of drove that point home in the last few years to me, that there's so much going on inside. We had a conversation, yes, on Saturday night. I actually went to a football match on Saturday, and I was telling him about it by text. And I went to an Arsenal game, and a couple of years ago, he went to a West Ham stadium tour with his mum, and straight away he started talking about that, and that blew my mind. Firstly, that he could pull it out of his memory, like West Ham. Uh, Said that he liked it, and as soon as I said football, that's what he associated it with. And at the time, we didn't know whether he enjoyed that day, whether it stuck in his memory, or. And here he was a couple of years later, just pulling it out, in the exact right context, and just able to have a conversation about it, which we couldn't back then. Um, so yeah, it really has shown a much deeper side. And I guess how's it changed me as a parent is, I think, realizing that what I was doing back then was everything I could as well. Knowing that, I think often as parents along the way, we beat ourselves up when especially when our kids are struggling. When, when Tommy and Jude have had periods of big meltdowns and being really distressed and anxious, and I've felt like the worst parent in the world, and that it must be my fault. I must be doing something wrong. That if someone else was their dad, they'd be much happier. And being in a dark place at times with those thoughts, because the only communication they were able to show was this distress and this real aggression and sadness. And when you can't fix that, you feel like I said, like the worst parent in the world. And I think as time has passed and I've seen the developments through both boys and I've seen their growth, and a lot of it has come just from literally time and being able to understand the world a little more and have more happy experiences, and for them to learn about the world and what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and for me to soak that up and realize that. And it's now we're able to talk about things a lot more. I can step back and soak up some of the successes, I guess, and realize, well, if I was to blame for the bad stuff, then maybe I'm to congratulate myself for some of the progress and the happiness that they're living right now.
Yeah, that's a really good way of reframing that, isn't it? And I'm sure there'll be many parents listening who feel exactly the same, James, who have days where they feel like the worst parent in the world, where they blame themselves, where they, are worried. And I always think that if you're a parent who's curious, if you're a parent who uh, is present, if you're a parent who shows compassion, awareness, empathy, you want to learn, you want to understand, you consider the environment that your child is in. I mean, these are the things, aren't they, that our children need from us more than anything. And there's so many things that are out of our control. Um, there's often less conversation about what comes next. I know you've talked a lot about one of your coping mechanisms, James, is to stay in the present and to really think about the present. But that also there's also a very uh, there's a reality here, isn't there, that you also do have to think about the future, because the reality is that your boys, Jude and Tommy, they are going to transition and are transitioning from childhood to adulthood. Um, and you are going to have hopes and worries about the future, just as you did when they were babies, when you were thinking, what would life be like when they're teenagers, when they get to 18? You're now thinking about transitioning into adulthood. What are some of your very real worries about the future, but also what are some of your biggest hopes um, for you and for your boys, and how are you navigating those? Let's start with the kind of worries and hopes that you have for your boys, and then what the worries and hopes that you have for yourself.
Yes, we are right in the middle of this time, and you're right. I've tried to stay as much in the present as possible with you know without looking too far ahead. Partly some of that. So Jude finishes school next July. He's got one more year left at school, and we're in the midst of figuring out what's next for him. What's life going to look like when school finishes? And one of the reasons we didn't look too far ahead is we were advised a few years ago that, firstly, by the time it gets around to Jude leaving, you don't know what's going to be available. If you're looking 5 years in advance, uh, whether that's because of budgets, whether that's because of local services, and also what would what would be right for Jude at 14 might not be what's right for him at 19. So you have to take some of that into account. But yeah, the last year or so is we've been lifting our head up and looking towards adulthood. Uh, my fears, I guess, are that there's not a right setting for them. We've been very. I have to catch myself from saying we've been very fortunate with school, because we've not had any more than what they should get, and should, like any child should have, in the fact that they've had the right school for them, and they've been well supported, and it's not been a huge battle to get that. So both of them have been at school since they were 4, in the same school until they're going to be 19. So it's 15 years of routine, same building, same teachers, same classmates, all of those things. And suddenly next year, that's going to be ripped away from Jude. And for Jude, there's not really a way of explaining to him why or what's happening next, and where those teachers that you've known for the last few years, where they've suddenly gone, or where your classmates have gone that you were friends with. And that hurts thinking about that. Then we have to find the right, what is he going to do Monday to Friday, whilst I work or whilst his mum works. And at the moment, that's looking like it will probably be a combination of a day centre for young adults and possibly a PA. So 1 or 2 days a week with a personal assistant who will take him out and do things. And a couple of years ago, that sounded incredibly scary because it's a new world, it's a new reality. But a couple of years ago, I started, as you mentioned in the bio, I started SA Clothing, and we have a business that's largely online, but we also have a shop which has become like a community hub. And during these last couple of years, I've met lots of families of adults. So whether they're a couple of years older than Jude or 20 years older than Jude, all with different stories to share, all with some of them still live at home, some of them live in supported living, some of them go to day centres, college, work. And I've soaked up all those experiences and realised that there's good people out there. We work very closely with a day centre, which probably isn't going to be the right choice for Jude, that particular day centre. But I've met all the young adults who go there. I've seen uh, they go to Butlins, they go bowling, they go to restaurants, they do work experience in the day centre. They live this full life that is lovely to see. Jude has been to a couple of their club nights where they have a nightclub that they take over for the evening. And I never would have expected Jude to be able to cope with that. Like, he's in a room of 50 young adults with music pumping, um, no alcohol for Jude, but and he's loving it. He's this kid who couldn't be around other kids when he was younger is going to a nightclub and enjoying and being in that experience. So as much as I'm scared of finding the right thing for Jude and finding the right people who can meet all of his needs in the next few years, I'm also quite hopeful because I've seen the success stories that are out there. I've also heard some negatives, but I've seen a lot of success stories too.
It really strikes me as you're talking that actually the community that you've built, sharing your stories as a family, about your boys and building that community online where you live, and having that is actually the thing that is giving you the hope now as you're navigating this next step. And I think we often underestimate the power that community has, in our lives, and how, when we don't have that community, for some of us, we have to go out and find it, don't we? We have to build it, we have to create it, or we have to, um, search for it. And it really sounds like that is something that is paying back 1,000 times over at the moment of the stories that you have shared.
I know that, the reason I share every day is because I know it helps other people, and I know there will be someone out there, whether their child has just received an autism diagnosis, whether their child is 16 and they're 10 years in, that get something from our stories. Like, honestly, I've had at least 10 people message to say their child is now texting them just because they've watched one of our stories about Tommy and they've decided to give it a go without, they'd never thought it was a thing, and suddenly they have it. There's so many instances like that. But on the flip side, like you said, I get so much from it because I get exposed to so many other people's stories who want to tell me theirs, who want to share their experiences, who come into our shop, and we sit around and chat um like I said, we've spoken to families who their child has, or young adult has just gone into supported living, and they've shared all the emotions they've gone through making that decision and how well it's going, and the, you've got parents whose 30-year-old has just got their first job, and all kinds of different experiences that Tommy or Jude might do in the future, or they might not. But it's just shown me that there are some very good people out there, number one, who work with our kids and with our adults, but also that there are things out there and different ways of living that could work for Tommy and Jude. So I'm hopeful that we find the right places. I think with Jude, the transition will be easier if we find the right place, because he's much more flexible and much more. If you meet his needs, he's happy, and it doesn't seem to matter whether, as long as you are kind and soft and gentle and want to help him, he's happy with that. Tommy is very rigid, very routine, very. Uh, his whole week is, very planned out to the minute, and it worries me that how, how he's going to move from school to something different, because school has been his life and he loves school. It's such a big part of his week that he runs to get on the school bus. Um, so when that time comes around and shifting him to something completely new, that is going to be much trickier. He will be able to experience a lot more and do a lot more things probably than Jude will be able to do, or will be comfortable in more situations, apart from the fact it's a change. And that worries me a lot. Um, and then longer term, it's the whole living situation, which I know is scary, and is, some people have very fixed views, and I had very fixed views years ago when the boys were smaller, that they'd live with me forever and no one else could ever look after them. Me and their mums would be the ones to do that. And then as time's gone on and you realise, firstly, like, what if something happened to one of us? How do we provide the level of care that they're going to need throughout adulthood? Um, I think after going through what I've been through with my parents and seeing, you realise, okay, well, if something happens to me when I'm 70 and they're 45, like what then? And having met quite a few parents who've been through it and discussed it, and talking about, well, naturally kids tend to move out in their, early 20s, mid 20s. And if you did that, then you're very involved and very healthy and very, you're very involved in every part of the move and every part of the setup, and can be very active for years to come. But if you do it at 70 in a crisis, because you can no longer provide the level of care, and then they're 45, 50, like, that's a huge shift to suddenly have to make changes then. And, everyone's got different circumstances and family situations, and I don't know what that future is going to hold for Jude or Tommy. I don't know whether that will be younger family members helping. I don't know whether that will be assisted living, or staying at home. But I'm more open to looking at the options and figuring out what's right for them, not what's right for what I think in my mind, or what I thought when Jude was 5, and that I have to be the one to look after him. I'm more open to figuring out what is the best solution for Jude and what's the best solution for Tommy, and then how do we make that happen? And that's petrifying.
Yeah, it's a very valid and real fear, though, isn't it? Yeah, a very valid and real fear of, especially when, uh, there's you and their mum who has been responsible for them entirely. Um, Thinking about what happens if something happens to one of you, and there's so many scenarios, isn't there, that runs through your head of, well, what would we do? And so much looking to the future. And I just wonder about you, James. I know you talked a lot about the living situation for Tommy and Jude, but what about you? Aside from being their dad, you are also James. Um, so what about your life? What hopes do you have for your life going forward? What are some of the things that perhaps you want to do?
I always struggle with this thought, with this question. I guess it's very prominent in my mind at the moment because life has changed a lot in the last 6 months. My dad passed away after I was caring for him for the last like 4 or 5 years. So I find myself naturally with a lot more time in my day than I did have. Uh, and some of that would cross over with periods of being with Jude or Tommy anyway, and juggling the different care needs. But now I do have a bit more flexibility. I do have a bit more freedom. We are reaching a point with Jude and Tommy where, especially as we go into adulthood, that we are able to do a bit more with and without them, and that's scary because after 15 years, I guess, of very involved in their lives in every aspect and very, uh, you know, to having to sit next to them all night to now suddenly they're teenagers who don't want me in the room, and I just meet their needs at various points of the night, and then I've got free time. uh, so so I've been dwelling on that question a lot and don't really have an answer other than I do want to, I guess, rediscover myself a bit more and what are the things that I enjoy and what are the things that I want to do outside of being dad, outside of being a carer. And some of that is being more social. I've definitely had a lot of isolation over the last 10 years. And so I do want to be able to spend more time with friends and family, which even is starting to happen a bit more naturally anyway, in terms of Jude and Tommy being more comfortable spending time with friends and family. So that's opening my world up a little bit too. Um, I'd like to have a holiday at some point. I don't know how that's going to work, but even if it's a couple of days, that would be nice to do every year. And yeah, I'm guess I'm in a phase of life of trying to figure out what I enjoy again and what I'd like to do as a hobby, what I'd like to to do outside of being dad.
Yeah, and I mean, 15 years, it's also the sleep thing as well, isn't it? So, I mean, sleep is a huge challenge for many autistic households. I'm 46 and I still struggle with sleep. Um, what or how has sleep or the lack of it, how do you think that has shaped your family life over the years? Because it's a long time to go with sleep deprivation. How do you think it shaped your family life, and what have you found has helped? I mean, it's always the golden question, isn't it, of what helps, and it's different for everybody. But what has helped your family? What's helped Jude and Tommy?
Yeah, sleep deprivation has been a huge part of our lives. From Jude has always survived on little sleep from being a baby, from the very early days of sleeping in like 2 hour blocks. And uh, we had many nights of up in the middle of the night, him in his buggy and rolling his buggy backwards and forwards and trying to get him to settle and go back to sleep. And which at the time, before autism, you think is we looked at colic, we looked at um, all the different things you go through as why a baby might not be sleeping, and then 16 years later, when you're still not having much sleep, you realise that maybe it's something different than that. Uh, we we've had better periods of sleep. We've had worse periods of sleep. We've had uh, Jude has been on different medications, not just for sleep, but for anxiety and thing. And at certain points, sleep has improved. I've always, since then, thought that anxiety plays a huge part in sleep quality and length of sleep. And if Jude is less anxious, he sleeps better, and if he sleeps better, he's less anxious. So it does go very much hand in hand. But like I said, that there's spells where with seemingly no reason, suddenly sleep is bad again. And then a few nights he'll sleep better. So it's been a real challenge. I think we had our worst period from about 5 to 9, and since then, no matter how bad it's got, it's never been that bad. So it's always been like, okay, well, at least we're not back there. At least he's not, because like Jude used to wake up and have huge meltdowns in the middle of the night and be screaming and crying and aggressive, and so that was horrendous, like just heartbreaking. On top of being exhausted from sleep. So when he doesn't sleep and there's no meltdown and uh, or any of that side of things. It's like, oh, it's just sleep. It feels so much easier. But also, as years go on, as I get older, as they get older, it definitely hits harder as well. Having 3 hours sleep and going to work 10 years ago was a lot more easy than having 3 hours sleep and going to work now. It definitely catches up with you. Even on nights where they do sleep, sometimes I find myself wide awake. I was talking about this recently. You mentioned in the beginning, I had a book come out, and I was fortunate enough to go and do some events around the country, which meant nights off and staying in the hotels, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't. Everyone's like, "Oh, you must be loving having a lie in," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I still went to sleep at like 1:30, 2 a.m. because I'm just like in that." And then waking up at like 6, 7 o'clock because you're just so used to it. So I wish I had a magic solution to for everyone's problems, but I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Uh, Melatonin helped for a while. That helped with getting Jude to sleep. Um, we've been on and off it over the years, and we're off it at the moment, not using it. But I know for some families, it's been a game changer. It's the sort of perfect solution for them. I spoke about anxiety. Definitely, when life is happier and more relaxed, sleep is a bit better. I also think it's about finding your own routines. Like, I think in the early days, we're very much imagining like perfect baby, perfect child, of how someone should sleep. And that's never been our reality. Tommy and Jude are both autistic, both have very different sleep routines, very different patterns of what works for them. And it's again now probably very different to what it was when they were 5 or 7, or not. Like, things change, and Tommy has a very complex step-by-step routine that we have to follow every night before he will go into his bedroom and go to bed. And Jude, I lead in to the bedroom probably 10 times a night, and he gets up and comes out, and I push it, guide him back again before he will fall asleep. And it works ish for us. Like I say, we have good periods, and we try and sleep when we have those good periods. But also, I think I'm quite fortunate now that I don't have to be next to them every minute of the evening. I can have a 20-minute nap without worrying that they're going to leave the house, without worrying that, you know, someone's going to get hurt or anything like that. We're at a stage now where, whilst Tommy's going through his steps of his routine, I can close my eyes for 10 minutes. And that helps a little. I mean, 6, 7 hours sleep every night would be much better, but those 10, 20 minutes all add up.
And I think sometimes for parents and carers and families who are listening, even just hearing other people's experiences about what sleep looks like in their household can be really helpful, can't it? Because you realise that it's not just you. It's not just you and your family experiencing this. That it can feel like a very lonely place to be, especially when you're perhaps living in a family unit where mum and dad aren't in the same household, and you're doing that alone as a solo parent in that sense. Even though you're co-parenting together, it can feel like it's just you experiencing this. That you're the only person in the entire world who is going through this on an evening and this routine. And so I think it's really helpful and hopeful for other families to hear this.
3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning is a very lonely time, and you do feel completely isolated, like you are the only one. So you're right, it does help. I remember the first time speaking to another parent who had similar when Jude was young, and it was like, okay, it's not because I'm an awful parent. There are so many of us whose kids struggle with sleep, and unfortunately, it is part of their neurological makeup, I guess.
And all of the typical sleep hygiene advice just doesn't apply, does it? And you realize very quickly, very early on, that it's not going to apply in this context. You've given lots of messages of hope in your conversation to people who are listening. But if there's one message of hope you'd want to give to any parent or carer who's listening to this episode, what would you want that to be?
I think the biggest shift in my acceptance and happiness as a parent for Tommy and Jude, and learning not to focus on all the big scary things and all the things that our kids aren't doing, was adjusting to something that I call celebrating the inch stones. I read years ago a parent describing the inch stones rather than the milestones that that are a natural part of our kids and parents' lives. You know, milestones could be walking, talking, making friends, going to school, doing exams, getting married, having a job, all of those kinds of big life event things, which I'll be honest, when Jude and Tommy got their autism diagnosis, that was what I focused on. Those big milestones that suddenly felt like they were never going to happen. And that became the focus for a long time. And I read that moment about inch stones and realized that there's so many inch stones in our day that happen daily that uh, just can fill our lives with joy if we stop and look and celebrate them, because that's what Jude and Tommy do. Like I described earlier, Jude sitting on the beach at 17 and throwing shells and stones and having them drip over his hands, that the happiness that he experienced in that moment was immense. Like it way more than him getting, you know, three A's at A level. Like it's like way more than any big achievement. He was so happy in that moment. And Jude and Tommy do that so often in their day. And it could be playing with water, it could be uh, celebrating the fact that when Tommy made a drink for himself at 9, he made his first drink. When Jude passed me his drink cup at 7 to show that he wanted a drink. Like they're tiny, insignificant things to most people, but have such an impact in our lives. And I think when we open ourselves up to really enjoying those moments and watching the enjoyment our kids get out of those moments, then we can shift that thinking of you know, oh, it should be about going on holiday to Spain. No, it's about playing with a water feature in the park. Like that, that to them is more exciting than going to Spain on holiday. And if you can tap into that, it gives you a lot more hope for the future. It makes the whole experience a lot more enjoyable, and you can really see the tiny little bits of progress that happen. week after week, month after month. And it's just changing that context. Like getting a text from your 14-year-old isn't that big a deal for most people. For us, or for a family like mine, it's huge. And like the joy I get every night when he texts me, I guarantee most parents do not get that joy from their 14-year-old texting them. They're probably like, oh, what now? Like, what are they asking for now? What's happening? Oh, what has something gone wrong? Like, and it's shifting that and adjusting to that. And I think it makes the experience so much more joyful. And then very quickly I will add to that, finding other people who live a life similar to yours. You mentioned it with sleep and how much of a difference that makes, knowing you're not the only one. And I'll say that's the same of this whole experience and everything we do in life. But if, for me, getting that community or building that community online and interacting with so many different people has been life-changing. But it was also life-changing when Jude was 2 and we met our first other parents whose child was 2 years older than Jude, and we're still very good friends now, who was just able to talk about all the different things and and get it that, yeah, having 2 hours sleep last night is really awful, and we can moan about it, and we can be scared about what's going to happen when they go to school, and all those different things. That it just helps so much, even if it's one person that you've got in your life who has an autistic kid, has something really in common with you. It can make such a difference.
Yeah. And they're really helpful, practical bits of hope and advice that you have left our listeners with. And, the whole program of Autism Central, the National Autism Peer Education Program, which is funded by NHS England, is about doing exactly that, about creating opportunities for parents to have that peer-to-peer support that's so needed. So thank you, James, for your time today and for coming on and sharing your story with us.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If any of the topics mentioned in today's episode are of special interest to you and you'd like to discuss this further, you can book a one-to-one session with a peer guide on our website at www.autismcentral.nhs.uk. Autism Central would encourage listeners to do their own research and make informed decisions about any strategies or equipment mentioned in this podcast. Any advice or suggestions given by a guest or peer educator do not replace or substitute advice received from direct consultation with a qualified professional. The Autism Central podcast is produced by Autism Central and is the copyright of NHS England.